Hello, and welcome to the fourth lesson in this technical writing unit I've come up with for my engineering class in high school. This is the fourth lesson and is talking about how to write instruction manuals. The project that I'm tying in with this unit is creating an instruction manual, and it's going to incorporate a few things from each lesson here and there. And so now we can finally kind of get into the meat, the substance of our project. Okay, so first, what is an instruction manual? Well, most of you are probably pretty familiar with what an instruction manual is. It's a type of manual that it is included with any kind of products, maybe a certain kind of process, and it has a few different functions depending on what kind of manual it is. Primarily, it is going to instruct people on how to do something, but there are a few different types you might want to consider. So the first type is what's called an operation manual. Operation manual is just teaching someone how to operate a product or a machine. They're very, very common in industry with large manufacturing pieces of equipment, very common in the house. In fact, I have a bunch of examples here from various sources. So I'll click one here. And right here under industry, we do have a operation manual for what's called a palletizer. A palletizer in a manufacturing facility is a machine that will either put a bulk order or maybe a pallet full of bulk raw materials onto a manufacturing line. So for instance, if you are bottling milk or something like that, you have a pallet with hundreds of milk bottles on it. And what you can do is you can put this pallet into a machine, and the machine will automatically grab all the bottles, put them on the line, back and forth, until the pallet is empty. And that way it's a very efficient way to get those milk bottles onto the line. What a palletizer might also do is at the end of a line, so that would be at the beginning of a manufacturing line. At the end of a manufacturing line, let's say you fill those bottles with milk and they go down the line. At the end, they get put inside a case, like a cardboard case, like a box, and that way they're sealed, and then you can ship them off to a manufacturer or a distribution center or a store or something like that. Well, at the end, when the box comes out of the line, a palletizer machine can take those boxes and palletize them on a pallet, right? And so it'll take a box, they'll stack it until you have a pallet that's full, and then that pallet will be shipped over to a warehouse, and then whatever happens after that. So that's a palletizer machine. And so right here we have a basic instruction manual. You see everything is very crisp and clear, black and white. This thing is very long. This thing is 388 pages. The thing with instruction manuals is they can be very short, they can be very long, depending on what you are aiming to do. Here you see they have a bunch of graphics, they have a bunch of instructions. Some of them have to do with the machine itself. Some of them are windows on how to operate the program. So like down here, for instance, we have a navigation window on some sort of panel, probably some code even, etc., etc. Okay, so you can also look at the table of contents up here, introduction. We have the workflow here, how to operate specifically or perform some kind of maintenance on it, et cetera, et cetera. And this is actually how you're going to operate it. So operation manuals for this specifically are going to be written for the audience of the person doing the operating. Obviously maintenance personnel or supervisors or engineers or whoever can get some sort of use out of it, of course. But the primary person that needs the information from that operation manual is the person that's going to be operating it, right? So another type of operation manual that you're probably more used to or more familiar with is a Nintendo Wii, the big phenomena in the mid-2000s. So I grabbed this from Nintendo's website. And where the operation manual for the palletizer is very geared towards people that might work in a factory. This one, the Nintendo Wii, was a video game system that was famous for being marketed and sold to a a very broad range of consumers. So typically, video game systems are for a certain type of consumer, a certain type of person. People that like to play video games. The Wii was marketed for general audiences, so even like your grandma can play it or something like that. And the instruction manual is supposed to be designed in a way to reflect that. And so you see here again, very straightforward, very nice images, very crisp images, like right here. Very accurate to what the product is actually displaying, just from experience. They have nice little arrows or graphics or paragraphs emanating from the graphics that kind of point you to exactly what each of these panels mean. The instructions are generally either very short. Hey, right here's the disc channel. Play Wii and Nintendo GameCube games. Okay. Me channel. Create characters that can be used in Me-compatible software programs. So very short and crisp. Some of the things that take longer to deliver their information or their content to you is going to be something like this, like the shortcut channels, something that requires more detail. But generally, you want to make it as user-friendly as possible, so people are more likely to read it and not, I guess, be agitated when they are reading it. Nice little diagrams here. Color. There's some color here and there, especially with a video game system. And they were, again, famous for being able to... You can customize your own little avatar, which is unique to what Microsoft and Sony came up with for their video game systems. Very colorful. And so they do a very good job at outlining the exact panel, the exact display that you're going to be seeing on the computer here. So very... very widespread. The audience should be able to read this pretty efficiently and understand it without getting frustrated. Okay. Second type of manual that I want to highlight is a maintenance manual, specifically for maintenance. So the example I have here is a maintenance manual for a label machine. And label machines, again, used in industry. If you've ever received like a bottle of Coke, for instance, that has a label on it, a jar of peanut butter has a label, any type of can of tomatoes has a label, anything like that. So there are different labeling machines for putting those labels on. Again, they can do hundreds or thousands of bottles or cans or whatever per minute. Very efficient machines. And so again, this maintenance machine is going to be written with the maintenance employee in mind. So they have the panels, they have instructions on how to operate the panels there. Okay, good. Okay, and something that's cool about auto manuals and especially maintenance manuals is they're going to include drawings, technical drawings, like we've gone over in class with Autodesk Inventor or any 3D modeling software that you might have experience in. So typically they're going to have drawings, and that's going to help the person, the maintenance person, do a number of things. Number one, they're going to be able to identify specific components. So if they need to focus on a single component for maintenance, like maybe they need to lube up chains or something like that, they know exactly where it is and what's surrounding it. If they need to take something apart, get it out of the way in order to access that part of the machine, that's very important. Number two, as you can see here, we have what's called a bill of materials that we have gone over in class. And it's just a list of all of the parts. It's kind of like a parts list for each component or assembly of that machine. And so not only is it important because it gives you the name of certain parts of the machine, but it also gives you a part number. As you can see here, each part has a part number, which is very, very important when it comes to contacting the company to come up with replacements. If you have a component like a gear, for instance, brake or a sprocket brake, you need that exact serial number or part number, so you can go to the company and when you request a quote for it, you have that part number there, so there's no confusion of size or anything like that. It references a specific part. There's no variation, so it eliminates confusion and potential mistakes that can be made. So a lot of maintenance manuals have drawings like this. Okay, and imagine the drawings we've done in class. Very simple compared to a lot of these. In industry, an engineer had to make these. They had to use their 3D modeling software skills to make all of these drawings. So these are a little more complicated than what we've done, but very challenging, very fun to do. Okay, great. So I'll get rid of this. Okay, maintenance manual. Again, mostly you're going to see a lot of those in industry and manufacturing firms, but of course you might have certain machines here. Cars, of course, have maintenance manuals. That's a very, very common one that everyone uses, including myself. Any type of maybe electronics or things with moving parts, a lot of moving parts in your home. Appliances especially, refrigerators or ovens or something like that, would have a maintenance manual so you know how to clean it, stuff like that. Okay. Let's say the third type of manual that I'll briefly go over is what's called an assembly manual. And this one is something you're also pretty familiar with. As the name implies, it's just a manual that is instructing you how to assemble a product. So here I have an example for a storage rack that you're going to put in a garage or something like that. Okay. Of course, you have warranty and tips, things like that. And then an overview. So they have step by step. You have a table here. You have a nice little diagram of parts. Everything is numbered. The quantity's there. Again, you have all your parts numbered. And then it goes to step 1. You're going to go to the end assembly and attach it. Step 2, step 3, etc., etc. And notice how they have nice diagrams for each step. Very, very important. Most people are visual learners. They react well to diagrams, to charts or graphs or things like that, much more so than words or blocks of text. So keep in mind when you are creating your instruction manual, whatever type of manual you want to do, diagrams like this are going to be super, super helpful and appreciated by your consumer. Okay. Assembly manuals are usually pretty short as well. They're much shorter compared to a lot of operation and definitely maintenance manuals, because the only intent there is to show you how to assemble it. And a lot of these, as you can imagine, are being replaced by options online, or at least being accompanied by options online. How-to videos on YouTube are very prevalent. No, I know, I use them. So there are different mediums you could do assembly with, but you're generally still going to see assembly instructions included with a lot of products you're going to assemble. This last weekend, I assembled a patio set for my wife for our backyard, and the instructions were maybe back and front and back. These things can be very short depending on the product and depending how specific you want to get. This one is about 11 pages long. That one was only like 2 or 3 pages long. Okay. And the last type of manual I will go over is a health and safety manual. Now, when you approach operation and maintenance manuals and stuff like that, very often there are safety warnings and information on safety and how this might affect your health and whatnot in the manual, usually either at the very beginning or at the very end, or if it's specific to us, like a step in the assembly or something. So you're not going to see these as frequently, but sometimes there are entire manuals devoted to how to approach something, whether it's a product or a process, safely. This one specifically is a manual that was created for certain property owners in a rural area on incoming construction work that was going to happen through the Federal Highway Administration, of course, on new roads. So they had to know what to expect in terms of what kind of machines were going to be present, what the process was going to look like, how long it was going to take, and certain resources they might need in order to contact people working on it, things like that. Okay. So a few considerations you want to take into account when you are creating an instruction manual. First, is it going to be short or long? Like I was saying, you could have an instruction manual that is short, front page, back page. You could have an instruction manual that's several hundred pages long. And there's no correct answer per se as to what the length of your instruction manual should be. It depends how detailed you want to be, and it depends on your audience, right? If it's going to be the average person, you probably want to make it pretty short because they have shorter attention spans and they just want to assemble their product as quickly as possible. I know I have. And so you probably don't want to drown it out as much as possible. Now, a manual for something in industry is used more as a reference. So like a maintenance manual for a machine, the maintenance people don't read that just once and toss it aside. They refer back to it every time they perform maintenance, or if a machine breaks down, they open up the maintenance manual and they have to, it's like a reference book. They don't have to read everything cover to cover, but they do want to look up specific chapters or specific sections of that manual. For instance, I bought a kind of a pen or a mouse that's shaped like a pen. It's an instruction manual like this. You see that it's very, very short. It says instruction manual right there. This just goes over how to install the battery, how to use the device with the buttons and stuff, and then some of the specs up top. And then on the back, we have our caution, certain notes with FCC and blah, blah, blah. So it can be as simple as this. And this one, fits into like a little square. That's how it came. It came folded just like that. So just things to consider. Whether they're simple or complex, again, know your audience, know your products, whether you need to use those technical terms, whether you're going to try to use as basic and simple terms as possible to keep things forward. Just understand who you're writing for and what kind of product or process you are writing about. I've been emphasizing different audiences all the time. Audiences are going to differ depending on a bunch of different things, education level, what area they live in, what kind of work they do, they complete, their profession. So your audience is very important. It's a very key factor when writing your manuals. Languages, right? Oftentimes you'll encounter a manual, specifically like an operation manual for some of your electronics, that have like 4 or 5 different languages printed on there. You have English, you have Spanish, French, German, things like that. Sometimes Arabic or Chinese or some other Asian language. So you need to understand your audience and how many people that speak different languages practically are going to be purchasing your product or using your product, and then you can account that way. Just keep in mind, whenever you add more languages, that's going to add more space. So let's say you're mass producing something like this and you have to produce an instruction manual and it costs $1 to produce every instruction manual. But if you add multiple languages, it's going to cost $1.50. And if that sounds like a little bit of money, but if you do it on a mass scale, like thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of units, that can add up to a lot of money. So just something to consider with languages. And then lastly, whether it's going to be printed on a piece of paper or it's going to be available online or maybe some other medium like a video or something like that. Again, depends on the type of products. Keep in mind, people have different preferences. If someone is older, they probably want something physically there. If someone's younger, they're probably more okay with the digital. I personally, I'm much better with the print type manuals, unless it's like a how-to video. I think those are amazing. And then where they're going to be reading it. In a factory, for instance, they're supposed to have certain lighting, but maybe if they have to go into a big machine or something like that, there's not going to be as much light. So take that into consideration. Maybe you need to use larger font or something like that, darker font in order to help people read it, or maybe bright colors, or maybe for certain warnings, you want to emphasize both the font and the color, make it red or yellow or something like that. So just take into consideration the location people are actually going to read it in. All right. Now, the design structure. So when you're designing an instruction manual, there are 4 sections that you're going to be focusing on. And they're very overarching sections. It's not like you're going to have title, general introduction, and stuff like that. These are just for parts. So the first one, of course, is title. And this can apply just to a section of a report or the report overall. Right here, I have a screenshot of just a section of a report. And so at the top here, we have our title. Our title is large. Now, we do have a couple other titles here. And notice as we work our way down the document, as we went over in the formatting lesson a couple lessons ago, the font is going to get smaller. Right there in the second one, we have supported barcode types. Looks like the same font, but it is smaller. You don't want as much attention on that title compared to the first one, because you want people to start from the very top and kind of work their way down. At the bottom, you have bolded in yet smaller font to use the barcode scanner. And so just keep in mind with titles comes different fonts and different ways you can do it, but you generally want to do it with hierarchy, starting tall or high up and working your way down. Secondly is the general introduction. So right under that title, you have kind of a brief description of what you're about to embark on, what the endeavor that is ahead of you, what you are going to be performing, whether it's operating or maintenance or assembling or whatever. It gives you a description of what's in store for you, just to give you an idea of kind of the time commitment or how much effort it's going to be to follow through with. Okay, next is the step-by-step instructions, which, as you might imagine, is going to comprise most of your instruction manual, especially depending on how complex your maintenance or your operation or your assembly is going to be. I mean, it can be a page long, it can be several pages long. And that's, of course, going to be chronological, right? Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this, et cetera, et cetera. And right here, there's not a lot when it comes to step-by-step instruction, because this is just a part. As you can see down here, it says Chapter 2, using your device, your barcode scanner. It's just a part. So there is a little bit of step-by-step instructions down there to use the barcode scanner. But these are going to be sprinkled out through the entire thing. Not only do you have the step-by-step directions, you might have things like tables with the parts that are is very common, especially in assemblies. They begin by giving you, hey, these are all the screws or all the parts and all the tools you have or you need to start off with. And that way you're not going through the assembly, halfway and I don't have this, and you go and find it and come back. Oh, I don't have this, and you go and come back. So they want everything there at the same time to move as efficiently as possible, and of course to limit how frustrated people get. So the step-by-step instructions part isn't just chronological stuff. That's certainly parts of it here and there, but you're going to have other elements as well. And then lastly is a conclusion. Conclusion acts in the way where not only does it just summarize kind of what you did, but also acts as a transition to the next part of the instructions. Okay, so creating a title. You want the title to be crisp, clean. You don't want it to be too muddled. You want it to be, you basically just want to state exactly what you're doing and add no more detail, right? With technical writing, you want to be as efficient as possible. You don't want to fluff it up. And you can see here using the barcode scanner, very straightforward. You're not adding any more words than you really need to, because it may be that. Contains how-to or gerunds. So effective titles. Again, this isn't a blanket rule. This is just a couple of good examples that you can do. But typically, titles are going to be like how to use the barcode scanner, or how to perform maintenance on this part, how to this, how to that, because we're already kind of expecting that kind of language, and it makes it easier for us to kind of pinpoint where we should start if the title is stating how to do something, and then we work our way down. Gerund is just a word that ends in ing, so you can see that first example up here using the barcode scanner. It implies an action. We're drawn to it, and it gets us moving forward when it comes to performing our operation. And then lastly, you want to avoid noun strings, which we've gone over before. That's just stuffing a bunch of nouns together, usually unnecessarily. You don't want to include that in your titles. You want them as brief as possible. Okay, now general instructions. So like I've emphasized a lot, you're going to want to think about your audience. Who is going to be carrying out the task? Is it going to be the general public? Is it going to be a maintenance person, line operator, maybe some sort of supervisor or executive? So just take that into consideration. Why should the reader carry out the task? What's the importance of this? I mean, most people are motivated when they're assembling to have their finished product. You pay hundreds of dollars for something like a patio set, and you want to see it through. You don't want it to sit in the corner of your garage or something. So why is it important? What motivation does the reader have to go through the instructions? When should the reader carry out the task? Typically, like for maintenance, for instance, you want to perform periodic maintenance, and the instruction manual is supposed to outline how frequent. Every month, every week, once a year, every 2 years, something like that. Whether you're doing the entire machine or certain components, maybe you have to oil things at certain times or put grease in. Maybe you have to replace wore down sprockets or something like that. What safety measures or other concerns should the reader understand? That goes without saying. Typically, when going over a section, you want to state the safety measures first, especially in an industrial setting, so people are more aware of what they should expect and avoid any kind of unfortunate accidents. What types or what items will the reader need? Right away, it should give you, oh, you need this kind of screwdriver, or oh, you need these bolts or something like that. You need these parts. For home item stuff, typically they give you all that stuff, which is nice. For maintenance, in the industrial setting, for instance, they're probably going to have most of that stuff on hand. And so they're going to have to go get it, put it in their toolbox or something like that. And then generally, how long is this task going to take? I can tell you from experience in the industry setting, every second a machine is down, you're losing money. You're bleeding money. So even though this maintenance is important and it's necessary, you have to do maintenance on machines to make sure they last and they don't break down as often. You do have to be conscious of how much time it is going to be down, because the shortest amount of time possible is ideal. You're going to be losing a lot less money as well. Why be down for 5 hours when you only have to be down for 2? You want to be efficient and make sure people can prepare for that. All right, creating step-by-step directions. So first, of course, you want to number the instructions. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Sometimes you write out the word step. Sometimes you just list it out, kind of like at the bottom here. And that way, of course, it's chronological. Second, present the right amount of information in each step. So you don't want to put too much information in each step to overload the reader and to confuse them. You don't want to squeeze 3 steps into one. You want to make it as flowy as possible, as clear. And so you're just going to want to put the exact right amount. You don't want too little either. Like, okay, pick up your screwdriver, step 1. That doesn't really do a lot. You can say, okay, now you want to screw this bolt in over here, and that implies you have to pick up a screwdriver or something like that. So make sure it's not too simple as well. It has to be just right. Using the imperative mood. So you want to make sure that it's the grammar and the language you're using is nice and flowy. And so on that note, you want to make sure that you're using the same tense. So whether it's present or past or whatever, you want to make sure the grammar is consistent, so it's neater and it flows nicer. Do not confuse steps and feedback statements. So you want so steps are supposed to show you exactly what to do. Outline, hey, here's an action you should take. Whereas a feedback statement is going to be something that says something like, oh, well, now it should look like this. If you've done it correctly, then it looks like this. And so that's not going to be a step. It doesn't require action on anyone's part. It's more of like feedback of making sure you're on the right track, which is great, right? You don't want to go through 10 steps and realize you put in the wrong screw somewhere. Oh, well, that's why, it seemed a little too loose, or it seemed a little too tight. You want to provide some kind of feedback to the person to make sure they are on the right track and not making any mistakes. Also, you definitely want to include graphics, like I was saying earlier. They have a nice little graphic down here. They even have a hand in there, which is very common. Very good tool. It shows exactly how the person is supposed to use it, which is very helpful with both maintenance and assembly manuals as well. But certainly operation. The person that's actually using it greatly benefits from seeing like a hand operating a machine, whether it's buttons or a panel or something like that. And then do not omit articles to save space. And the, and, a, and the. So people are tempted to write as efficiently as possible and to exclude words here and there. So like I said earlier, that top title using the barcode scanner, they still included the word "the" in there, which is good. You usually don't want to remove those. Because if you took it out, imagine it's just using barcode scanner. Okay, it's a little choppy. You want to be as clear as possible, so it's not too much to add articles like that in there. Okay, last section here, creating conclusions. So, like I said earlier, the purpose of conclusions is you want to summarize everything you've done, but you also want to include sort of a transition into the next set of instructions or the next step or something like that. So I put a little example here. It's now that you've replaced the glass and applied the glazing compound, let the window sit for at least 5 days so that the glazing can cure. Then prime the paint in window. So it gives you a summary of what you've done, what is going to happen between your last action and the next action, and then what relatively you're going to do for the next action. You're not going to go into specifics, about how to prime and paint the window, but you are stating what to do next, just so people have an idea of what they are going to do moving forward. It's kind of like the introduction, right? You want to give people an idea of the kind of work they're performing, and it just ties everything together very nicely. And then sometimes it ends with maintenance tips, troubleshooting, or safety tips, which is very true. For something like an operation manual for a product, they might not manufacture a maintenance manual for the average person, but they might add little maintenance tidbits here and there, because full-blown maintenance manual isn't really required. You just need to know a couple things. Of course, troubleshooting, more common in operation. Definitely in maintenance, if something is going wrong, you need to know, well, what's it doing? Okay, well, if you hear this or you see this, then this is probably the issue. So then you go in there and fix it. So those are very important. And then, of course, general safety tips are going to be seen toward the end, unless they're very prevalent, like they need to know ahead of time before doing the operation or assembling. Then there's going to be at the beginning. Okay. Again, the importance of graphics cannot be emphasized enough. I just put a few examples here of the typical graphics you're going to see. You're going to see diagrams, and whether that's something up here with the hand, or if something down here with the balloons, so the numbered balloons 6, 7, and 8, pointing towards certain parts, so you can identify the item over here in the tables. Diagrams are very important. As I showed you earlier, there's drawings available in a lot of maintenance manuals that are essential for maintenance workers to use when troubleshooting and doing maintenance on machines and just understanding them in general. And then typical tables might include something like the part number. Over here on the very right side, that's sort of a table of, and has graphics in it, of certain pieces, what they are, and maybe the quantities. Right there, it shows you, tools you need for your safety. So a very good example right there of the beginning of installation instructions. But again, you want to give as much information as possible in a very clear way, and graphics do a great job in helping you to do that. Okay, just a note on safety warnings. A few safety warnings you are going to see, typically danger, warning, general warning, caution, important, stuff like that. Oftentimes they're denoted with different colors. Danger, of course, is red. It's going to be like your maximum warning level. You need people to read this. Usually it includes health and safety type stuff. For example, with the example here listed under danger. Danger, extremely high voltage, stand back. That could lead to death if someone stands too close. So someone really needs to be aware of the danger. You have a general warning right here. Warning sometimes has to do with health and safety. Typically it's only injuries. It's not life and death. Or maybe catastrophic machine failure or something like that. You typically put a warning there. And then for caution is generally minor issues you might run into in terms of operation or maintenance. Right here, caution, do not use non-rechargeable batteries in this charging unit. They could damage the charging unit, which of course can be fixed, but it's very inconvenient. You don't want to touch that. You're going to see these, again, in the beginning, at the end, in the middle, sprinkled throughout the step-by-steps. Very important. And not just for consumer safety, which is number one, or user safety, but for legal reasons, right? For legal reasons, you often need danger or warning type symbols or notes in there, just in case, to cover yourself. All right, and that's it. So the assignment for this, it looks long. It's not, I promise. It's pretty simple. It's just we're going to start the instruction manual project, and I'll show you the design brief of that in a sec. But what I want you to do is I just want you to gather 3 instruction manuals, and you can choose what kinds they are, whether they're operation, maintenance, assembly, or safety, and whether they're physical ones, print ones, or you can find them online. I showed you both. Totally up to you. It's totally fine. For the internet, you can just type in, something instruction or operation manual, and typically the company website will have something, especially if it's electronics related. So I want you to find the manuals that preferably are going to kind of correlate with the object you chose for your instruction manual project. And that way you kind of get some ideas of how you want to write and structure your instruction manual. So I say study these manuals and look for information that ties to what we just went over. So I showed you a bunch of examples, and just think about some of the information like the design structure and the graphics, and see how the real world does it, how industry does it, typically how they structure things, just to get, again, an idea on how you can replicate some of that stuff in your own instruction manual. And start to get ideas. So here is the design brief. Okay. And I just pulled this template. And I'll read you the problem statement first. So, you are a group of out-of-work engineers. The downturn in the economy and increased manufacturing outsourcing, like overseas to companies like India and China, have limited your ability to secure and continue employment. You decide to invent a new product to sell and patent so you can acquire a source of income. You need at least $100,000 of funding to start up design and production of your invention at a facility in Fresno, California. So you approach a bank to request that funding. The bank wants to see an instruction manual for the invention before issuing out a loan. The more confident the bank is in your product, the more they will likely invest in your group. So what I want you to do is I want you to basically come up with your group, your engineering firm, or whatever you want to call it. And I want you to come up with an invention. Now, the invention could be something that has already been invented, something you hope to invent. It could be a fantastical idea. I actually have an example. Let me see if I can bring it up real quick. Of one I did. Oh, I don't want that. This one. Documents. Instruction manual project. I actually have an example of one I did in college. And our project was a much larger scale than this, but so we have an instruction manual here. Okay. And you want to, where was I going with this? You want your own engineering group. You want to decide who your stakeholders are. You want to come up with an invention. In college, we had certain parameters when it came to our invention. Had to be powered by something other than batteries, electricity. We had to be very creative when it came to that stuff. We came up with a device that was supposed to the power source was, I believe it was solar or something like that, and it was supposed to alter the weather around you. So if it was hot outside, like it often gets in California, you can use this device and it will create kind of a cool barrier around you. So we created this long instruction manual. Okay. Again, yours wouldn't have to be as complicated as this, but we had a nice little diagram. We had something numbered there, our titles, table of contents, stuff like that. So this one's a little less intensive. I just want you to come up with a device. I have your design constraints down here. You must name and label these parts in a way that will make sense to your audience. Okay, it's obvious. You must explain what the device does when it is assembled and identify and state the purpose of the parts of the device. Some kind of go without saying, like a screw, but maybe there's some fantastical idea or component that you want to use in your device. For us, I can't quite remember. We had to come up with a name and whatnot for our device. Solar cells, thermal sync, display screen. Yeah. So just you have to identify what exactly they do. And the energy source and control set of the device must be outlined in the prototype. So I'm not going to throw any crazy requirements on it, but however the device is powered, just outline how it is powered, whether it is batteries or something fantastical. And then a control set, meaning like how you're going to control it. Does it have buttons? Is it a touch screen? How do you operate it? But with what appendages or with what parts are you going to interact with in order to operate it? And then I want you to include at least 2 warnings in your instruction manual, whether they're at the end or starting at a component or at the beginning or something like that, just to give you a good, well-rounded piece of experience constructing an instruction manual and thinking about what you need to put in an instruction manual for it to be effective for the audience you are trying to get at. So you can just use, again, you can come up with your firm name, your group. You can imagine what you want your the bank to be called, or not a lot of creativity there. You get to decide what your target consumer is, what kind of people are going to be using your product or reading your manual, and then any stakeholders. I like to add this in my design briefs. So who's affected by this? Of course you are, of course the bank is, and then who else? Okay, and then a brief design statement there. So this is your project. That's all I have for you. I am kind of leaving a lot up to you. I don't necessarily have a rubric this time around, just the criteria and constraints for the design brief. But I'm interested to see what kind of manuals you do come up with. So that's where I'm going to end the video. And I'll attach all this stuff on Google Classroom. And I hope to see you next time.